warm welcome to you all for the second day workshop on data analysis methods for research in social sciences.
Starting.
Yeah, sponsored by ICSSR SPC Hyderabad. It's organized by Department of Economics. And today we have three sessions, from 10 o'clock to 11:30 on sampling methods and sample size determination using SPSS by Professor S. Indrakant sir, CES Hyderabad. And second session from 11:45 to 1:15 p.m. Topic is on correlation and regression analysis using SPSS and eViews by Professor E. C. Ravi sir, CES Hyderabad. And third session from 2 o'clock to 3:30. It's on test of causality in time series using eViews by Professor Debashish Acharya, Hyderabad Central University. So now a brief biodata about a resource person for the present session. Professor Indrakant sir is going to share by Ms. Kalpana.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. A very good morning to one and all, and welcome to today's session. Myself, Kalpana, Department of Economics, UCW. All the faculty members and participants, today is the second day of the online 3-day national workshop on data analysis methods for research in social sciences. It is my great pleasure to introduce today's resource person, Professor S. Indrakant sir. Professor S. Indrakant sir presently is visiting professor at Center for Economic and Social Studies, Hyderabad. Earlier, he was RBI chair professor at Council for Social Department, Hyderabad. So, head of the Department of Economics, Osmania University, and chairman, Board of Studies and Department of Economics, Osmania University, in this year 2004 to 2006 in Hyderabad. He has successfully guided 7 PhD scholars and 6 MPhil scholars, and Professor Indrakant sir, with more than 4 decades of rich teaching and research experience, has independently directed 5 research projects and associated with another 15 research projects sponsored by agencies like UNDP, Ford Foundation, ADB, and World Bank. He has 72 publications to his credit, which are published in reputed national and international journals. He has authored from books, 4 books, and edited another 2 books. He has organized 5 national seminars, 7 workshops, and 2 departmental conferences of lectures of economics, and coordinated 2 research councils in economics and 6 orientation programs. Professor Indrakant sir has delivered nearly 200 lectures as resource person in various workshops, seminars, and conferences. He has member of selection committee of various universities and colleges and service commissions. As a student, he had a bright academic record with the second rank in both graduation and post-graduation, and won gold medal for securing highest marks in economics at graduation. With the brief introduction, I request to Professor Indrakant sir to deliver his lecture on the topic sampling methods and sample size determination using SPSS. Thank you. Welcome, sir.
Good morning. At the outset, I want to congratulate the organizers, the Department of Economics, Osmania University, for organizing a workshop which I think going to empower the research scholars and will be able to come out with good research output. I also thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to share some of my views on sampling, which may hopefully be useful to the scholars. Then I appreciate the interest of the research scholars who are going to participate, who are participating and going to participate in the remaining sessions in the workshop. Because if you want to achieve anything, you should have first interest. Once you have interest, you can achieve anything. If you don't have interest, no person can help you. So I congratulate you for taking interest to participate in the workshop. There are good resource persons are there, and hopefully their lectures will be of immense use to you. Then now coming to today's topic on sampling, I feel it's one of the important topic which a research scholar must have a good background so that he will do his research job very well. In one way, this sampling technique, do you think is useful only for research scholars or even for a common man? Is it useful? So the answer to this question is this sampling technique useful for not only for research scholar, even for a layman, it is useful. You think does a layman knows about sampling technique? Without knowing, how can he use? One may ask question. Yes, this is a good question. Unknowingly, without knowing much about sampling technique, a layman makes use of this sampling technique. So when he is going to purchase some grapes, how he will take a decision whether to purchase the grapes or not? He will take a sample of the grapes, taste them, and depending upon the sample of grapes he has tasted, he will decide whether it is worthwhile to buy the grapes, whether the grapes are of good quality, whether it is worth paying that much price demanded by the seller. So, unknowingly, he is making use of this sampling technique. He may not be well versed with all the things, but intuitively, he takes on his own way, he makes a judgment, some knowledge, some notions about sampling, which he will be unknowingly making use of this sampling technique. A research scholar, when he is making use of sampling technique, he should be more careful and use it very carefully. This is what our today's topic for the discussion. I will share some of the PPTs so that it may be of use to you. Yeah. One. Okay. Very good. This is the title of the topic. And next. Oh, as I told you, even a layman makes use of sampling technique unknowingly, especially when he is trying to buy fruits like grapes or other fruits. He will take a sample of it and then make a decide. Even in bulk purchase like rice or when you want to a book a retailer wants to buy pens, he will take a few pens and see how it is writing. Based on that, he will take a decision. When you are going to buy rice, a bag of rice, you take a sample of the rice and decide how good it is. So even what I am trying to say is even layman unknowingly makes use of sampling technique. That is, he takes a sample of the things he wants to purchase and make a judgment. Based on that, he will take a decision whether it is worth buying or not. Next. Now, what do we do in research? Some people when you are at home or your parents will ask, I'm doing research. What are you going to do research? In research, basically we try to seek answers to questions which are of interest to us. Uh, these questions are of two types. One are called fundamental research, other are applied research. So let us see what are the fundamental research, what are the applied research. Now, fundamental research, you may be knowing Newton. Suddenly, when he was sitting under that a tree, apple fell, and he started asking the question, why apple fell to the ground? Why not it didn't go up? Is a question. So, from that, nobody can directly benefit. But that was a fundamental question research. Why apple falls to the ground? Why it not goes up? Uh, how now when you dust is there, some particles of dust goes up. Why the apple comes down to the ground is a question. Similarly, how Earth is formed. A scientist, why should we bother with how Earth is born? A common man is not interested. He says, this is the Earth, I have to live on the Earth. That's all right. He is least bothered about why Earth, how Earth was formed. But a scientist would like to know how the Earth was formed. Then not only Earth, even there are continents. How continents are formed? They say new continents are being formed. Why and how new continents are formed? These are the some fundamental questions which only scientist is interested. Why and when eclipse occur? We also see eclipse come. When if eclipse comes, some people say, okay, it has come, that's all. Why it comes, when it comes, this all a part of the scientific research or fundamental research. Now we'll see what is applied research. Applied research is we want to know the use. Whatever we do, it should be of some use. What is the use of only doing fundamental research? Say, what is the impact of advertisement expenditure on sales of a company? A owner of a company wants to decide whether it's worthwhile to spend on advertisement or not. So he wants to know what is the impact of advertisement expenditure on sales. How much sales are likely to increase if we spend something more on advertisement. Then a company proprietor may think, by paying higher commission to the dealers, can he hope to increase the sales of his company? Then another is more related to consumers, whether the type of garments a consumer selects, does it depend upon his education level? So a educated person may wear one type of garment, a non illiterate or not so well educated may like another type of garment design. Whether design and literacy level are they related? A shopkeeper wants to know, suppose more educated persons are going to come to his shop, customers. So he will put one type of garment designs because he knows educated people would prefer this type of design. Similarly, the expenditure on entertainment, does it vary with the income level of a household? If the income of a household is higher, is it going to spend more on entertainment? Some may disappoint, no, sir. Even poor people also spend more on entertainment. They may not spend on essential, they spend only on entertainment, enjoyment. Whatever little money they have, they want to spend. A rich man, he is aware of how great difficulty he earned, so he will be very careful. He may not spend on entertainment. So this is a question to be probed, whether the expenditure on entertainment, does it vary with the level of income? That means, do rich people spend more on entertainment compared to poor people? These are applied research. Now, we not only question, sometimes we require some information, especially research scholars. Because parents may ask when you want to do PhD, how many years does it take? Graduation, people know graduation take 3 years. Post graduation means 2 years. No. Now PhD, how many years does it take? Is a question which is very difficult to answer even for a researcher. It is a very embarrassing question. How much time it takes to complete a PhD? So it's very uncertain. Now, how to answer this question? Maybe we have to see in the past, ask all those who have completed PhD how much time they have taken to complete their PhD. Because this, you also know whether you may be in dilemma whether I should go for a job or a competitive exam or should I do PhD, complete my PhD. Because somebody says, oh, completing PhD takes more time. Why don't you prepare for competitive exam? So we want to know what is the average time taken by a PhD scholar to complete their research. Similarly, what is the average time taken by social science scholars to complete their research? Because some people feel in science what they do, just they sit in the lab, complete, do some experiments, complete and do the research and write report and get their PhD. Whereas social scientist, he has to go to the field, he has to ask the people, contact them, convince them, take answers from them, information from them, tabulate them, give it to computer, processing it, and then start writing report. So some people feel that social science scholars, for them to do PhD takes more time. So we want to know what is the average time taken by the social science scholars. Similarly, average time taken with MPhil background, scholars. Some people say if you do MPhil, you can do PhD quickly. Is it true? Is a question. Some people say whether you do MPhil or not, PhD is again a fresher, again it will take same time as others who have not done PhD. Similarly, average time taken by a married PhD scholar. Some people say those who are married take more time. Some people say no, married people only take less time because they will be at home only. They will be careful and they will not waste their time and make use of it. These are some of the questions which one may be interested, especially PhD scholars may be very much interested to know answer this question because they want to know when they can hopefully complete their research work. Okay, next set of questions. What is the number of atheists in Hyderabad? Some people say in the urban area there are more atheists compared to rural people. In rural people believe in God. Those who are in urban, they not much believe in God. So is it the number of atheists more among the men compared to women? Women are more uh, believe in God. Women believe more larger proportion of women believe in God, whereas larger proportion of men may not believe in God. This is a thing which may think. What about with literacy? Whether belief in will they become atheist is a question. Is youth age older people? Yeah, when you are young, you don't believe in God. You may not believe in God. Hey, I can do everything. When you become old, you start believing in God. It is a so. Is the proportion of atheists more among youth? Atheists means those who don't believe in God. Proportion existence of God. Proportion it is more among the urbanized. Is it more urban people more atheist compared to relate rural people? So these are some of the again rich people. Poor people may believe in God. They may go to temple or other place of worship. But rich people say, I don't want. So like that, whether with as people become rich, do they become atheists also? These are some of the questions which may be interested to know. So these are questions which I have set this thing. We can skip this. These are similar questions. But question is okay, there may be 101 questions. But how to answer these questions? How to answer? Fine. Asking a question is very easy. You can, as a student, you cannot ask a question to a teacher. But how it is difficult for a teacher to answer those questions. So asking a question is easy, but answering those questions is more difficult. So now how to answer these questions? There are two approaches to answer this question. We collect the data from all the concerned persons, concerned units, which is called census approach. Now, some people say census approach, instead we will take only few, collect information, and then try to answer these questions. Okay. So that shows the data is needed to answer these questions. So to be more specific, we have to answer these questions, we have to collect data. To collect data, we have to plan, we have to invest and conduct an inquiry, and then we can also have evaluation, see how it is taking place. So basically, the essence of this argument is there are large number of questions one may be interested. To answer these questions, we need data. Now comes the question how to collect the data, and what are the types of data. There are two types of data. One is called primary data, other is called secondary data. Primary data means the data which you yourself collect is called primary data. Secondary data means which somebody already has collected and you are making use of this. Now, internet, so much data is available. Our government has collected so much data. There are so many reports. From newspaper, there's so many things on it. TV news, TV, we get so much information. All these are second data. But sometimes you feel the second data is not sufficient for your study. You say, I will collect the fresh data. So you may have to take the trouble of collecting the data which by yourself. That data which you collect yourself is called primary data. But if you make use of data which is already collected by others, then it is called second data. Okay, second data, when you collect data, if it is used by other, for him, it will be other person, for other person, your primary data will become second data for him. You have collected the data, you made use, but others may also make use of your data. Then for the second person, the data collected by you will be secondary data. For you, it is the primary data. Same data which you have collected is primary data for you. The data which is collected by you but used by others, for them it will become secondary data. Okay. Now, question is how to collect a primary data. There are two methods. One is called census method. Here we cover all the units in the population. So if you do it thoroughly, there is a good advantage is you can get 100% accurate result. But generally, there are many types of errors are there. Um, so sampling errors, non-sampling errors can be there. But anyway, census is very costly because you have to collect data from many, so you have to spend more money. It takes more time. Sometimes it's not necessary. Sometimes it is dangerous. And sometimes non-sampling errors also can be more in census data. Now, sampling method, it is a study. We are studying only part of the population and want to generalize out of that. Say, as I gave in the beginning, while selecting the fruits, deciding whether to purchase or not to purchase fruits, we take a sample of it. Not, we don't eat all the fruits. We take sample of the fruits, and based on that sample, we take a decision whether it's worthwhile to buy the fruits at the price quoted by the seller. And what are the advantage? Advantage of sampling method is very economical. It takes less time. We can train the investigator well, and he will be very efficient in collecting. Sometimes it because census not possible, so sampling ultimately we have to depend only on sampling only. Then non-sampling error will be less. But most disadvantage in sampling method is selection of sample, which will be very important. When you are when you are making a sample study, you have to be careful. You have to be very careful in selecting a sample, because if you are not careful, your results, one may question your result. So one may question the reliability of your conclusion. So it becomes, if you are not careful, it becomes difficult for you to defend your results. Oh, so now primary data in methods of collecting the data. Either we can have face-to-face interview, or we can have a questionnaire or a schedule.
Sorry for disturbance. So most of the people are asking the PPT. So please do it if it is possible now, or else we can say it to some time.
Hello.
Hello, sir. If you don't mind.
Hello. Any problem with PPT?
Yeah. If it is not visible, please share it. Please share it.
PPT is not visible.
PPT is not visible.
PPT is not visible.
Okay.
PPT is not visible.
Now
No,
is it okay?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Sir, there is a 3 dots are there. Please click beside that one. There is a present now option is there.
3 dots. Hello.
Sir, please click on the present now option.
Click where?
The present now. The left side of the more options. The 3 dots are there.
3 dots. Okay.
3 dots. So there is a symbol is there present now, like laptop symbol. RM is also there. We can that.
Please be patient. We are trying. Three dots under it.
Now it is visible, sir.
Hello.
Sir, now it is visible.
Now visible. Okay.
Now it is visible.
We can see, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Now it is visible. Is it okay?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So what are the methods of collecting primary data? Primary data to collect, either you can go have face-to-face interview. This is very important for a research scholar. If you want to know what is the impact of COVID on different section of population, you can go and talk to them face-to-face and then collect information. Otherwise, you can have a questionnaire or a schedule. And scholars think that questionnaire and schedule are one and the same. There is small difference between a questionnaire and a schedule. Questionnaire means there are questions which that questionnaire you will give it to the respondent. He will fill up. The questionnaire is given to the respondent. He will fill up. Whereas schedule, the investigator will ask the question and respondent will give the answer. The investigator will fill up the schedule. Schedule is filled up by the investigator. Questionnaire is filled up by the respondent. Suppose the respondent is a literate person. You are going and asking all postgraduate students. Then you can give the questionnaire to them. They will fill up and give it back to you, questionnaire. But in schedule, when the respondent is illiterate, we should use only schedule. In schedule, it is the investigator will ask the question and fill up the information in the schedule. Questionnaire is, it is given to the respondent himself fills up. This is the small difference between the questionnaire and schedule. Scholars sometimes use it as synonyms. They are not really one and same. There is some difference. questionnaires, the respondent himself fills up, and this is possible only when respondent is literate. If respondent is literate, then no use of giving questionnaire to him. In schedule, the questions are asked by the investigator, and the respondent will give answer, and then the investigator will fill up the schedule. Now, census operation is going to have to take place in 2021, but because of COVID, it was not taken up. In census, what is it? The schedule is filled by the enumerator. It is not the household will not fill up the information. It is the information is filled up by the enumerator. So it is called schedule. Whereas questionnaire is the respondent himself fill up. Otherwise, sometimes you cannot go to the thing, you will post him, postal questionnaire, or you can have telephone interview. But each method has its own plus points and negative points. Depending upon your study, you have to decide which method you want to use.
Favorite fruit है.
Okay. Now, to understand sampling, we need knowledge of few concepts which you almost be knowing of it. Just as a revision, I'm trying parameter and a statistic. What is it we say? Parameter, any characteristic of a population is called parameter. Statistic is the property of the sample. Parameter is the characteristic of a population. I want to know what is the average time taken by PhD scholars to complete their research. 4 years, 5 years, how much time it takes. That is the characteristic average time of PhD scholars, of all the PhD scholars of Osmania University, of economics department. How much time do they take? This is the whole population. Economics, my population is PhD scholars of economics department who have registered from 1992 till now. How many have completed? How much time did they time taken? This is the characteristic of the population. Statistic means I will take only sample of them and see what is the average time taken by those selected sample. So statistic is a characteristic of a sample. Parameter is a characteristic of a population. Generally, characteristic of population we don't know. So what we do is we take a sample, study its characteristic, and based on it, we will try to come to conclusion about the parameter. Population size and sample size. Population size is generally large. All the units in the population. Now I gave an example. All the economic scholars who registered from 1990 to 2015. How many have registered? This is my population. Sample sizes, I'll take few scholars. Those who have registered in 1990 to 95, some. From 95 to 2000, some sample. And from 2000 to 2005, I take scholars who have registered different phases of time period and then make a sample. So I will not be taking all the scholars, only those who have completed some of them. Now, a sample frame and sampling error. Sample frame means this is a very important concept. Many people don't know. Sample frame means we have to prepare the list of from which we are going to select the sample. Sample frame means we have to prepare the list of units in the population. Now my population is all those scholars who have registered for PhD in economics department. This is I have to make a list of it from 1990 to 2015. All those who have registered is my sample frame. From that I will pick up a sample. What is a sample frame? The frame from which I am going to pick up a sample is called sampling frame. The frame from which I am going to pick up a sample is called sampling frame. Here, in the present example, sample frame is all those PhD scholars who registered in economic department of Usman University from 1990 to 2015. This is the sample frame, the list of the thing from which I am going to select. Then next important is sampling error. Sampling error means I have taken a sample, but I may get some estimate, but it may be different from what actually is in the population. There may be some difference between what I have got in the population and what I have got in the sample, what actually is in the population. The difference is because of I have taken only sample. The error which is arising because of taking only sample and coming to judgment on that population, there may be some difference. The difference between what is there in the population and what actually found in sample, the difference we can call it as sampling error. This error arises because we are coming to a judgment based on a sample. There is a standard error, and standard error is tries to tell how much variation is there. We'll be able to tell how much variation is there, and this is used for estimation purpose. Non-sampling errors, errors which are because of other than sampling. This is there whether it is sampling or non-sampling. Non-sampling error will be there. Non-sampling means we may ask one question to a respondent. The question and the respondent may not understand our question. We may ask, has it improved your self-confidence? The person, the respondent may not be knowing the meaning of self-confidence. So we are asking a question, he may not understand our question. Even if he understands question, he may answer something which we don't know because his accent and we may not be able to understand. So these mistakes which arise because of communication gap and various other reasons are called non-sampling errors. Okay, these are necessary to understand the sampling methods. So why actually we want to do sampling? The purpose of sampling is two purposes. One is we want to make population estimation of population parameter, characteristic of the population, which is unknown to us. So based on a sample, we are trying to make a estimate of the population parameter. Say what is the average time taken by a PhD scholar. We want to estimate. So based on a sample, we want to estimate. Testing about a population parameter. We want to test a population parameter. One hypothesis I will give you. Those who have done a MPhil will be able to do PhD in a shorter time. This is a hypothesis. I made a hypothesis which has to be examined. Those with MPhil background take less time to complete their PhD. One may accept, one may reject. But I have to, my conclusion should be based on a sample. So sample can also be used to test a hypothesis. In the present case, what is the hypothesis? Hypothesis, those with MPhil background can do their PhD in a shorter time. That's what it is. So these are the two purposes for sampling. One is population to estimate population parameter. Other is for testing hypothesis. So what are the types of sampling? The types of sampling, one is called probability sampling, other is called non-probability sampling. So let us see what is meant by probability sampling, what is meant by non-probability sampling. Next. So in probability sampling, we select the units in a systematic manner. We do it in a more objective manner. There is no personal bias in it. So in a way we can say it is more scientific. In a way we can say we select at random. So I I was very cautious in using the word random because people are using this term random in a very loose sense. We have to be random has a specific meaning in scientific study. So therefore, I was not using the term random. But in simple words, probability sampling means it is a very scientific. There is no personal bias. There is no investigator bias. Um, the most advantage is we will be able to tell the sampling error. We will be able to tell how much there is sampling error in our estimation because we have taken in a more scientific manner, we will be able to tell. So one may take a sample, go to a village, has a select some 100 persons from that village. He may come to a conclusion. But somebody asks, how far is it correct? How far is it reliable? You should give some sort of measurement to tell how much reliable it is. That sampling error will help us to tell the what is the extent of reliability. Because another person may say, I will go to the same village, I will take say another 100 persons. Am I going to get this more or less same result or not? My sample result and your sample result, are they going to be very much different? So if therefore one may want to know what you have done a sample, we accept. You have taken the trouble, you have gone to the village, you have collected, taken the trouble to collect information, tabulated, done applied statistical tools. But how far is it reliable? Because one may question, if I go to the same village, take another 100 persons, will my result be different from your result? How far your results are reliable is a question. So the responsibility of the researcher is not only to take sample and tell the result, you should also tell how much reliable it is. Okay. So then how to draw a probability sample? Probability sample, we have to, there are three methods. One is lottery method, using second is random table, third is some mechanical device. Lottery method means suppose I want to select PhD scholars who have registered in Osmania University. I'll make a list and from those who have registered from 1990 to 95, I will take some of them. I will write their names on each name on a slip, mix them and pick up like that. That is called lottery method. We write the names of the scholars who have registered, who had registered at Usman University, put in a box, thoroughly mix them, and then select. That is called lottery method. There is another method which is this is possible if the number is population size is small. Yes, this is possible. Other is called, there are random number tables have been prepared by the statisticians. We can use the random number table, pick up, suppose I have to take about 20 persons, 20 scholars from a list. Using the random number table, I pick up 20 random numbers and the corresponding scholar will be picked up. Each scholar will be given a random number and it will be given arranged in a seriatim, and whatever number appears in the random table will take it. So scholars are supposed to, each scholar are supposed to be aware of this random number. Somehow for unknown reason this has not been given due importance in the literature. My appeal to scholars is kindly have a look at this random number, kindly know how to pick up the numbers. Just saying that I have taken a random sample is deceiving yourself, deceiving the others. Please don't do that. It doesn't matter. If you don't know anything about that random number, then books on statistics which will tell us what is random number, how to pick up random number. Then there is a mechanical device. It is outdated. People generally are not using this thing. So we'll not spend much time. But Most modern method is using random number table to pick up a random sample. Okay. How to pick up a non-probability sampling? Non-probability sampling, you can take whatever your choice is there. Because whoever comes, suppose I want to know tomorrow there is a Huzurabad election in Huzurabad. Who will win? What I do, I want to conduct a survey. You will go and ask whoever comes into your this thing. You stand at a corner and keep on asking which party will be voting. That is then no probability, nothing. You are just picking up. That is called non-probability sampling. Oh, it is easy for you to collect data. No question of selection, no question of lottery method, writing the names and the chit and picking up. No such. Whoever comes across, you will put the question, ask the answer. But is it a scientific method? No, because first of all, whether we don't know whether his name is in the voter list or not, we don't know. And also we don't know whether he will go and vote in the election. Also, we don't know. Even if he wants, his name is in the voter list. If he wants to go to the polling booth, we don't know whether his vote has been casted by somebody or not. So, but we'll be asking the question to him: which party are you going to vote? So, this is not a scientific method. It's okay for convenience you are taken. Journalistic people may do that, but that is not very scientific. It's not possible to estimate. The problem is we are not able to estimate sampling error. So many election predictions are that is called psephology. Election predictions are take place. Will they give what is the sampling error? No, because they have not picked up a probability sample. They have picked up a non-probability sample. So you may tell this party will win, this party may not win, like that. All right. But what is the chance that how far your results are reliable? We don't know. They will not be able to tell. So this is good for explorative studies, but not for when we cannot generalize the results. Only to have some knowledge we can use this method. Again, there are different types of probability sampling. One is called simple random sample, proportionate stratified sample, disproportionate multi-stage stratified sample. So systematic sample, cluster sampling. So the idea is that people generally say either simple random sample or multi-stage stratified random sample, but may not be have clear idea about what each means. So let us try to see in brief what are these methods. In simple random sample, all the units in the population are given same chance of being selected. For example, the case which I was talking about, selection of PhD scholars who are selected, who are registered at Usmania University. I'll make a list of them, write their names in each name in a chit and thoroughly mix them and pick up. So I have not made any distinction when they registered. I have just put their name, write the name, made a list. Each name I wrote on one slip and put the slip on a box and thing. This is called simple random sample because each scholar who registered in Usmania University has equal chance of being selected. X or Y or Z has same chance of being selected. So this is called simple random sample. In simple random sample, all the persons have same chance of being selected. Now I may have proportionate sampling. Suppose from the list I make ladies candidate and gent scholars. Make it two groups, and then I find ladies 30% ladies have registered for PhD and 70% gents have registered. From the main list, I come to know that 30% ladies have registered for PhD and 70% have males have registered. So in my sample, I'll make 2 boxes, all male in one box, all females chits are in another box. So 30% of sample I will take from the one box, that is the lady's name, and another remaining 70 from the gents box. So now it is called proportionate sampling. I have proportioned depending upon their gender, this thing. So this is possible because we feel we have to give equal chance, due weightage to gender. If you feel, then this type of proportionate sampling. This, what is disproportionate sampling? On the other end, suppose I don't want, I want equal chance, equal. Say ladies 50%, gent 50%. That is called disproportionate sampling. So the now multi-stage stratified sampling. Multi-stage stratified sampling, I told, the scholars will be categorized into the timing of the registration. The one strata is those who register from 90 to 95. Second strata is from 96 to 2000, 2001 to 2005. So I have made strata. From each strata, again within each strata, I will male, female. From 90 to 95, there is one strata. Again within them, I will make male, female. Again, my second strata is 96 to 2000. Again, I will make into 2 strata. Again, male, female. So this is called, this type of, from each strata I will select few units. So few scholars. This type of selection is called multi-stage stratified sampling. That is, first the whole population is made into different stratas, and again within the strata again we'll classify, and from each strata we take few. That is called multi-stage stratified sampling. So depending upon your subject matter, you decide how to design your sample. There is another more popular is systematic sampling. So in systematic sampling, what is that we start with a random number and selection is made at uniform at a regular interval. Say for example, already houses are arranged in order. I'll not make a list. I'll go to the first household, then 6th household, then 11th household. Here what I'm saying, random, I start with a random sample. Maybe need not be first. Suppose 1 to 5, I will take to random. I got 2. So I will go to the second household. After leave a gap of 5, 7th household. From 7th household, I go to the 12th household. So this is called, we have a random start and keep on selecting at regular interval next unit, corresponding unit. So this is called systematic sample. This is possible. The advantage is you don't have to make a sample frame, need not be there. Already houses are arranged. So now you want to know COVID-19, how slum people were affected due to COVID. So all the slum dwellers, their huts are arranged. So you go in already and take a systematic sample. Cluster sampling. Next important is cluster sampling. Here population divided into different heterogeneous clusters and enumerate all the units in the selected clusters. So we make a cluster and the population divided into clusters. Suppose I have to see what is the how many hours a university scholars study. So taking all the scholars from all the universities is very difficult. I will divide the universities into clusters. The top university, middle level universities, not so level. So they are different clusters. From each cluster, I may pick up some universities, and from each university, I may pick up some colleges, and then so basically here cluster is a miniature of the whole population. So there, if we study the cluster, we get full information about the population. So non-probability sample, people take. This is called accidental sample. We stand in a street, keep on whoever comes to, we can ask question. Convenient sampling. Those who are our neighbors, we ask question. Quota sampling. We have decided I will ask 10 postgraduate students, 5 graduate students, 3 intermediate students. So you have put a quota and accordingly you will. Then we have purpose is select sampling. So you want to know because of how people got COVID purposely. So here we will go to those who were affected by COVID virus, because those who are not affected, who are lucky, who are not affected by COVID, we will not take them. Our purpose is those who are affected by COVID, what treatment did they take? So there is a particular purpose. Keeping purpose in our mind, we select a sample. This is called purposive sampling. Judgment sampling. We think that in our opinion, they give correct answers. So we think those who are in huts, they give sincere answer. Those who are living in buildings, they may not give. Those who are very simple to look, they give this thing. Those who have this thing should put up show, they may not give true answer. So based on our judgment, we select people. That is called judgment now sampling. Then we have a snowball sampling. Sometimes this snowball sampling is very helpful. So what is snowball sampling means? From one respondent we go to another respondent. Suppose there is a doctor who is, we want to select some persons who have some disease, say AIDS. There is one popular doctor who is providing treatment to AIDS. We go to one patient. From that patient, we say, who recommended your name to this doctor? He says, I was recommended so and so. We go to that person. Again, from that is another AIDS patient. So from him, again, we'll go to another patient. We'll ask him, second patient, who recommended you the doctor's name? He may give another name. So we keep on building up. This is called snowball sampling. That is from one patient, we go to another patient, from another patient, and this is called snowball sampling. Sometimes this will be very useful. Okay, this we have all discussed, all these things all have been discussed, but skip. We are skipping some slides which are not interesting. Yeah, now very important question we are asking. How to draw a sample is very easy. You have given all the descriptive stories, sir. Very nice. And many scholars come and ask, sir, I am taking 100 farmers. Is it sufficient? Somebody may say, I have taken 50 companies for my study. Is it sufficient? I have taken 200 employees in a factory, workers. Is it sufficient? For somebody may say, I have taken only 50 persons. Somebody may in seminar may say 50 is a small number. Somebody may say, I will go and ask 1,000 large farmers. Then it will become very big. Somebody may say, how are you going to contact 1,000? So what should be the size of the sample? How to pick up a sample? Fine. So far we have tried to study what are the methods of picking up a sample. Most important is what should be the size of the sample? What should be the size of the sample? So if you go to a statistician, the problem with statistician is he will, if you ask question, in turn, he will ask 3 questions. Instead of answering your question, he will ask 3 questions. If you answer these 3 questions, I will answer your first question. So you go to a statistician and ask him, sir, what should be the size of the sample? Oh, you want answer for this question? Now, before I answer your question, I will ask you 3 questions. Will you answer those 3 questions? If you answer those 3 questions, I will answer your first question. That is he will say. So what are the question, the statistician will ask when you ask, sir, what should be the size of the sample for my study? What should be the size? Then the statistician will say, I will answer your question, don't worry, wait, have patience. Then he will ask, his question is, what is the degree of heterogeneity in your population? You say, you may, see, that is his first question. What is the degree of heterogeneity? That then he may ask, second question he may ask, how accurate you want to be? How accurate you want to be? Then within how much time you want to answer? Within how much time? So you asked only one question. Your question is, what should be the size of the population? In turn, a statistician will ask 3 questions. What the questions are, what is the degree of heterogeneity in the population? What is how accurate you want to be? How much time you have to study? Then you may say, you may repent, why did I come to this statistician? Instead of answering my question, he's again creating more problems for me. I am not able to understand his questions. Basically, his questions are don't answering, leave alone. I am not able to answer his questions. Understand? Say, for example, what do you mean by heterogeneity? You have not heard this term heterogeneity. How to know heterogeneity? You have to ask him, sir, what do you mean by heterogeneity? So in simple words, a statistician means heterogeneity. How much variation is there in the population? How much dispersion is there in the population? Then you will slowly understand, I have learned something about dispersion, standard deviation, mean deviation, range, interquartile range. I had learned something on dispersion, measures of dispersion in statistics. So now you are slightly trying to understand the first question, that is how much dispersion is there in our population. That is what is the thing. Dispersion in simple words, dispersion means what is the range? What is the highest value? What is the lowest value? Say time taken for PhD scholars to complete their research. Highest means a person may take 8 years. Some person is lucky, he may take 3 years. Then you may say, okay, sir, heterogeneity, 8 years is the maximum period, 3 years is the shortest period. So some sort of dispersion. How much dispersion? How much accurate? Second question is, how accurate you want to be? You may say, sir, you are not fully, you yourself don't know how accurate you want to be, but you may, to satisfy the statistician, you may say, sir, 90 or 95% accuracy I want to be, sir. Okay, statistician feels happy. Then third is, how much time you have, sir? Time is not much, sir. I have to complete my work because this is the last year my research, and now I have started collecting field data. Then in such case, then how many strata you want to be, and how many subsamples. Within a sample, we'll have subsample. So a statistician may give you a formula, a big formula, but the formulas are big to look at. Don't get frightened about the bigness of the size of the formula. Like a big elephant, I keep telling, even elephants, they are very big to look at, but they can be tamed. These formulas, if you become familiar, you develop friendship with them, they will become your friends. You can tame them. They will be very friendly with you. Then in the formula, we find there are some symbols, that is sigma I. Sigma I is standard deviation, or variance, square root of variance is the standard deviation, divided by the root of C. Root of C is the cost of collecting the data. Cost of collecting the data. Basically, what this formula is trying to, the message that we can draw from this big formula is that you should select more where there is more heterogeneity. You should select more because it is in the numerator. If it is something in numerator, more. If in a if there is a substrata where there is more heterogeneity, you select more units from that. And the cost of collecting data, that is square root of C, cost of collecting. Wherever your cost of collecting data is very high, try to collect, don't select many from that substrata, because suppose you have to take from Andaman and Nicobar, going and collecting data from Andaman and Nicobar is very difficult. If you want Andaman, Nicobar or somewhere what is called, you can take some Pondicherry something, and here Edur Lanka, there is a thing we can take from there. Right. So what we are saying is, basically this formula says the size of the sample should be decided based on the heterogeneity in the population. If the population is more heterogeneous, take more units. If in a population everybody is ditto, they look alike. Each person has same type of nose, same type of facial structure. Everything is face. If every person in the population is same, then why do you take any one person? Others will be similar to him. So if there is not much variation in a population, you take a small sample. If there is large variation in the population, then you have to take more. And next, the cost of cultivation. Take few from that population, from that sector where cost of collection is more, because you have to optimally utilize your resources. You have to optimally utilize resources. So when you want to optimally utilize resources, better take more from that substrata where cost of collection is less, and less from that section where the cost of collection is more. Now all story, sir, we have learned all the things. Tell us, there are so many methods of selecting a sample and other things. Then you may ask, you tell us in short, what is your verdict? So how to choose a sample design? For sample design, you have to take following consideration. One is, what is the purpose of your study? How accurate you want to be? What is the cost? And what is the time? Keeping all these in mind, you decide how to select a sample and what should be the size of the sample. Then in short, optimal design means, should we go only for probability sampling or non-probability sampling? They are not mutually exclusive in a way. Sometimes we may have to, sometimes non-probability sampling, though it's very not so scientific, sometimes we are compelled. At some stage we have to take non-probability sampling, and some stage we have to take only probability. Non-probability sampling, for example, blood, blood sample. You can't take blood of a patient from one drop of blood from hand, another drop of blood from a leg, another drop from the different parts of body. You can't take. You take from any part, that's the same thing. So it doesn't, you take on either hand or any part, you take blood. So it's, you may say it's non-probability sampling. Yes, it's non-probability, but it doesn't make a difference, because the blood in your hand, which flows in your hand, the blood which flows in your legs are the same blood. There's not much difference. blood is homogeneous. Everywhere the same blood is flowing in your body. It doesn't matter from which part of the body you take the blood. It is the same blood. So when there is no heterogeneity, even a drop of that will be sufficient to study. So their non-probability sampling is serve the purpose. We can't call it a, so you don't have to disturb. But sometimes if you want to be know how accurate your results are there, then you have to take the probability sampling. So thank you. I hope whatever we discussed may be of some use in your research work. So once again, I thank the organizers for giving this opportunity to me to share my views. There is a small modification in my table. They were saying using SPSS, but anyway, there is not much using SPSS. I should have brought random number tables, showed you how to pick up from random number tables. I thought it would be more difficult, so I did not take the trouble. But those who want to know how to use random number table, they can take any statistic book, take the help of any statistician. They will be able to help you to make use of the random number tables. But a scholar who is making a study on sample basis, he is supposed to know these things. What is a random number table? What is a standard error? How reliable the results are there? These are some of the important concepts which I try to focus on it. And if there are some questions or clarifications, there is some time the scholars can, participants can pose those questions for clarification. So I stop here.
So, thank you, sir. There is one question, Varsha. So she has something here. So we asked the question that when to use the disproportionate stratified random sampling method. Hello, sir.
Okay.
So one of the participants asked the question that when to use disproportionate stratified random sampling method.
Yeah.
So meanwhile, anybody is there? If you have any doubts, you can ask now, or you can type the message in the chat box also.
Yeah, that's better. Yeah. And now already one question has been posed: disproportionate sampling. When we should use disproportionate sampling? Now, in a village, when you go, you make a list of all the farmers, and you get that in the list 40% are small farmers. 40% of the farmers are small. 30% are medium farmers, and remaining or 30% are small, 40% are small, 30% are medium, and another 30% are large. So 40, 30, 30. 40 are small, 30 are medium, another 30 are large, total 100. Now, if you want proportionate means 40% small you should take, 30% small you should, medium you should take, 30% of sample you should take from large. This is called proportionate. But in small farmers, though they are 40%, there is not much variation. All the small farmers will be very similar. All the farmers, they have same story to tell. There is not much variation among the small farmers. So why to spend your resources much on small farmers where they are going to tell the same story? So in such case, you take a smaller proportion of small farmers. Say 20% small farmers you take, 30% 30% medium farmers, and remaining 50% from large farmers. Why large farmers? Though they in the population they are 30%, but we are taking 50% in our sample. Why large farmers more than proportionate we are taking? Because there is a difference between one large farmer to another large farmer. A large a farmer having 20 acres is a large farmer. A farmer having 50 acres is also large farmer. But there is a much variation among between the two. There is much variation between a farmer having 20 acres and a farmer having 50 acres. So better we take more large farmers, more percentage of large farmers, more than proportionate. Though in the population they are only 30%, still we are taking 50% large farmers because there is much variation in the large farmers, among the large farmers. But whereas small farmers, though they are 40%, we are taking only 20% of them because they have same story to repeat. So when there is more homogeneous, why should you take the trouble of collecting proportion? You can less than proportionate you can take. It means you are utilizing your resources more optimally. So disproportionate sampling must be used when within each strata the heterogeneity is varying. You take more from that subpopulation where heterogeneity is more, less from that substrata where heterogeneity is less. Okay. Hope I can try to clear your doubt.
Is there another one? Put some clarifications or doubts related to the sampling methods and how we can determine the sample size when you are going to do some research. Yeah, I think you can ask. Sir, another question is raised by some Saheb. So, good morning, sir. How to handle scenarios where obtaining the data, both primary and secondary, becomes challenging and time-taking?
Can you repeat the question? It's not audible.
How to handle scenarios?
How to handle? How to handle?
Scenarios.
Sceneries.
Scenarios where obtaining data, both primary and secondary.
Sceneries.
Scenarios.
No, sceneries. Is it the word sceneries? Are you referring?
Scenarios.
How to
Scenarios.
how to handle how to handle sceneries?
Scenarios.
Scenarios. Okay. How to handle scenarios in can you complete the question, please?
Obtaining data is challenging, sir.
Yeah. This is a good question. When we are preparing a questionnaire, this must be at the back of the mind. When you are preparing, many scholars come to me with 10-page questionnaire. 10-page questionnaire. Then I will ask who has the patience to answer these 10 questions, this 10-page questionnaire. So you should ask questions which are very simple, which are understandable to the respondent, and it is easy for him to answer. And also it should not be very time consuming. It should not be very time consuming. And these are important things while preparing a questionnaire. So simplicity first, we should be able to understand. And there should not be very personally questions related to which hurts his ego or prestige and anything. So these are the things, and we should go at a time when he is relatively free. He is relatively free. So collecting data is highly challenging, and we have to take the trouble. That's what. It's for a physical science lab is they can do the experiment in lab, but for a social science field is the lab. So, and we have to deal with the respondents. How you deal with the respondent all depends on your capacity, your skills. And how do you get the skills? You may ask. By reading books, you will not get the skills. If you want to learn swimming, by reading books, you will not become a good swimmer. You have to go to the pond, jump into the pond, and swim. So also, when you go to the field work, you have to, depending upon the situation there, you have to devise new techniques, and this is only out of experience. This is only out of experience you get. Therefore, you take suggestions from those who have conducted field study. That is one thing. Even whatever suggestion you take from them, that will not be sufficient. If you take a questionnaire, have a pre-testing. Pre-testing of the question is there. The usefulness of pre-testing a questionnaire is not only we are testing how the questionnaire will be, how to ask the question, you will also learn the technique of asking which questions the respondent will feel difficult and things. So answer to your question is basically it is the experience with which tells us. You take guidance from the experts who have conducted field study. Sometimes your own friends may be of great help to you, and then you conduct a pre-testing. Conduct a pre-test, and the pre-test you can conduct on any person. So go to that village, administer the questionnaire, because now we are not taking, so we can, from that we can know which question is difficult, how to put that question to the respondent, because the way you are asking, they may not be able to understand your question, that local dialect may be different, all those things. So when we do this thing, so in short, taking help from the experienced persons. Secondly, conducting pre-testing will help you in collection of data. Okay.
Yeah, still, is there anyone? Need some clarifications. You may unmute and you can ask directly also. Sindhil, Ramli.
Yeah. Sir, this is Nandil from Chennai. I have a question.
Okay.
So, sir, it's I'm looking one of a larger area on the research. So, how I can choose the sampling? Example, if I take a study on one of the digital users in India, especially in a specific city, either it's Hyderabad or any specific location. So, which the sample size I can use it in a better way to get the research on the accurate or it's at least close results.
Okay.
I'm new to this. I'm new to this entire thing, sir. I think it would be helpful.
First of all, we are happy you are from Chennai. The department is proud of you that you have taken interest to listen to our workshop, participate in the workshop. Thank you for this thing. And your question is good. You want to know something study about the digital users.
Yes, sir.
How to take, how much sample should I take is a question.
That's right, sir.
Now you may say a pure statistician. No, no, no. I repeated some time back. First, you have to prepare the list of population. From the list of the population, you have to take a sample. Then you may say this person doesn't know anything about the ground reality. The thing is, now in such a situation, when it's very difficult to prepare the list of the digital users, you have a very difficult. Where will you get? So what you have to do is, the best way of tackling in such a case, how to select the sample. Now, in this case, such cases, what you have to do is you go to those persons who are providing services of digital service providers. Who are providing these services? Those from service providers, they have a list. They have their customer list. So from their customer list, there are 5 digital, suppose you take Chennai itself. In Chennai, you want to see in Chennai how many digital users are, what is their background, why they are using, whether it is really useful, all those things. Something you want to study about the digital users. What is their experience? What are the benefits they are getting? All those things you want to ask them. Either you take Chennai or any urban town, because if you feel Chennai is a very big, you may take a slightly smaller town. So you go to those who are providing these services. From those services, you take a list. You have to build a rapport with them. That's all. You have to build a rapport with them, and then take a list. Maybe about 10% in this case, because digital provider users are broadly educated persons, mostly I think literate and other things. So I don't expect there is much variation. So you can take even 10% of the sample will be ordered. 10% of, so digital service provider A is there. So how many customers do they have in Chennai? 10% of it. And most of that you can have on either on internet, you can get contact with the respondent or over telephone or something. So my suggestion is, for such type of studies, you take the help of the service providers who are providing services. You go and build a rapport with them, make it clear that you are doing it purely for research work, not any investigation work, nothing like that. People, because you have to first build up the confidence that you show that I am a research scholar. This is my introduction letter from the concerned authorities, and whatever service information provided will be used only for research, and it will be not used for any other persons. Everything will be kept confidential. You build up confidence among them and show that you are academically interested, only academic purpose, not for any investigation purpose. This thing. Then within 1 or 2 meetings, you may not be able to build a rapport. It will take couple of visits, but in due course of time, they definitely, once they are convinced that you are doing purely for research work, definitely they will cooperate with you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you, sir, for clarifying the doubts. So now I invite Dr. Lakshmi Madam to propose a vote of thanks for this lecture. Lakshmi Madam.
Okay.
Yeah, please.
Thank you, Daisy Madam. Thank you, Kondal. Good morning, everyone. I am Dr. Lakshmi, Associate Professor, Department of Economics, and I'm here to present the vote of thanks for today's lecture. I would like to thank our guest lecture speaker, Professor Indrakant sir, for the wonderful lecture on sampling methods and sampling size determination. Especially some of the examples and analogs were pretty interesting and made the concepts easy to understand. I'm sure students have learned something new today. and will apply the knowledge in their future research projects. Once again, I would like to thank Professor Indrakant sir taking out time from his busy schedule and enlightening us with the knowledge. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I am not a guest. I am also part of the department. So still I consider I am part of the department, Lakshmi.
Best kada sir meeru.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, one and all.
Now the session is closed.
Thank you, Ramlu sir.
People should have to join at 11:40.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
After 5 minutes, all people should have to join. All the participants should have to join. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.